All right, in the past you've looked at simplifying radicals. Now we're going to look at simplifying radicals with a negative underneath. So if we look at something like the square root of negative 49, okay, you've seen problems like this before. However, every time you see a negative underneath, you've been able to say, hey, it doesn't exist. Well, that's not necessarily the case. With a negative underneath, this is actually where we have imaginary solutions. The square root of negative 1 is equivalent to what we call I, which is our imaginary solution. All right, so every time we see a square root underneath, square root of negative 1, all we have to say is, hey, that's just equivalent to I. So I can break this thing down over here into the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 49. So that means this is just I, square roots of 49, and 49 is a perfect square, so that means that this is just 7I. And that would be your solution for that type of problem. Let's look at one that's like a little bit more complex. So let's say the square root of negative 120. All right. This one takes a little bit more work. 120 is not a perfect square. So my rule of thumb is when simplifying perfect squares, only divide by prime numbers. So 2's, 3's, 5's, 7's, and 11's. All right. Go by those prime numbers. You can pretty much break down any number. But already what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take out our I. And so I square root of 120. Okay, every time you see a negative underneath a radical, you need to take out the I. So I square root to 120. Now we can actually work with the 120. So since 120 is even, we can break that down into 2 and 60. And notice how I always put my prime numbers on the left. That way everything's nice and organized. Again, divisible by 2, so 2 and 30. Let's just say that for some reason that I didn't realize this one was divisible by 2. Well, look at your other numbers up here. You have 3's, 5's, 7's, and 11's. Let's go by 3's. So 3 and 10, and then again 2 and 5. Well, this is a square root, okay? We're only going to be dealing with square roots, so that means we need to circle pairs. Anything that's paired up can come outside. So there's a pair of 2's right there. There's a single 3, there's a single 2, and there's a single 5. There's nothing else. So that means that the 2's are the only things that come out. Everything else has to be multiplied together. So we end up with 2I square root. All right, and then we have to multiply our 3 times our 2 times our 5. So 3 times 2 is 6, and then 6 times 5 is 30. So 2I square root of 30. Let's try one more problem just for good measure. So the square root of negative 190. All right, hit the pause button. I would like for you to start this problem on your own. So hit pause now and get as far as you can. All right, I hope you've tried to work this problem out. Now, the first thing I told you to do is make sure you always take out your i's. So I square root of 190. It is an even number, so we're going to break that down by 2's. So that is 2 and 85. Now this is where we run into, actually it's 2 and 95, my mistake. 2 and 95, so this is where we start running into a little bit of an issue. 95 is not divisible by 2. So remember, I always told you to divide by 2's, 3's, 5's, 7's, and 11's, just the prime numbers. You need to have those numbers written down somewhere. Those are 2's, 3's, 5's, 7, 11. Prime numbers, numbers that can't be broke down any further, all right? So 2 does not go into this, 3 doesn't go into it, but it ends in a 5, so we're going to go 5. That would be 5 and 19. Well, 5 doesn't simplify any further. 19 is a prime number, so that means this thing has absolutely no pairs. So our final answer is going to be I square root of 190. Now, I'm going to show you one more type of problem to show you how to deal with this, because you'll run into this on your worksheet today. So let's say that there's a number sitting on the outside. Negative 3 square root 20. Now, there's a negative involved in this problem. However, there's not a negative underneath the radical. So that means this problem is not imaginary. The only time it's imaginary is if there is a negative underneath the radical. So this is not imaginary. Not imaginary. So there's no reason to use an I. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the 20 and we're going to break it down into 2 and to 10. And then 10 breaks down into 2 and 5. Circle your pairs. So that means the 2's pair up. Now, this is what's kind of interesting with this problem. There's already a number sitting on the outside, and I'm bringing out a 2 with it. So it's -3 times 2, and then the square root of 5 is still underneath. Well, we need to multiply these two numbers together. The 2's coming from the pairs, and the -3's coming from the thing that was already sitting out in front. All right, so -2 or -3 times 2 makes -6 square roots of 5. One last problem. Let's try 2 square root -80. I want you to hit the pause button. I want you to try this problem on your own and then verify your solution with the video. So hit pause now and work it out. All right, hopefully you've worked this out. We see a negative underneath. That does mean this is imaginary, so we're going to go ahead and take out the I before we do anything else. So 2I square root 80. Now we need to break down 80, so that's 2 and 40. That is 2 and 20. It's still even, so we're going to continue to go with that. So that is 2 and 10, and then 2 and 5. Okay, circle your pairs. So we have pairs there and pairs there. Now this one has 2 sets of pairs, which means I actually get to bring out 2 numbers. And then it has this 5 that's left alone, so he has to stay underneath. So we have 2 and 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. So 4 is the number coming on the outside. So we have 2I times 4 square root, and then the 5 is left underneath. And remember, the 4 came from the 2's that we brought out there. So 1 2 from here, and then one more 2 from there. So this is really 2 times 2. All right, so 2I times 4 makes 8I square root 5. Please make sure you're putting your I in front of your radical. All right, what I need for you to try now is problems number 5 through 10 on your worksheet. If you're having issue, please raise your hand and your teacher will come around and help you.